BTK was a moniker created by the man responsible for the murders of at least 10 people between 1974 and 1991. 13 years had passed, and the BTK had claimed no more victims. In 2004, the investigation of the BTK case was considered a cold case. The media would make claims that the killer must either be dead or in jail, but in reality, BTK was still out there. After 13 years, he was missing his notoriety and wanted to begin killing again. Desperate to refute the claims of his death or incarceration, BTK began writing letters to the media and the police, something which he did regularly throughout his murder spree. He sent 10 taunting messages to authorities, many of them to Wichita Police Lieutenant Ken Landwehr, with whom BTK thought he had a special rapport. In his letters to Landwehr, BTK asked if his writing, if put on a floppy disk, could be traced. Landwehr answered his question in a newspaper ad, saying it would be safe to use the disk. On February 16, 2005, a few weeks after BTK made the floppy disk inquiry, a package arrived at a local television station. The package contained a letter, a gold-colored necklace with a large medallion, a photocopy of the cover of Rules of Prey, a 1989 novel by John Sanford about a serial killer, and most notably, a floppy disk. The letter confirmed that the package was from the BTK. Naturally, when Police Lieutenant Ken Landwehr assured BTK that the floppy disk couldn't be traced, he was not being truthful. Authorities vigorously searched the disk and would ultimately find deleted metadata, which the BTK was not aware was still stored on the disk. This deleted metadata contained a Word document which contained the words Christ Lutheran Church and was marked as last modified by Dennis. A quick search online led police to the president of the church council, Dennis Rader. Although this evidence was circumstantial, it led authorities to their man. They would later gain DNA evidence from one of Dennis Rader's daughters and compared it to DNA found at one of the crime scenes. It resulted in a familial match, which indicated that the killer was closely related to Rader's daughter. This evidence was enough for Dennis Rader to be arrested, charged, and outed as the notorious BTK. Rader was quoted as feeling betrayed and unhappy that Landwehr had lied to him about the floppy disk. He apparently believed that Landwehr couldn't afford to lie to him because he knew if he did, Rader would cut off communications with him. Dennis Rader would be sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole for 175 years, equivalent to 10 consecutive life sentences. Amid his murder spree, Rader intended to kill others, such as 63-year-old Anna Williams. On April 28, 1979, Anna Williams, 63, went out with friends. Dennis Rader cut the telephone lines to her home, broke in, and waited hours for her to return. When she didn't return in the time frame he expected, he became frustrated and left her home. In his confession, Rader stated that he had become obsessed with Anna and was absolutely livid when she returned later than expected. When she returned home, she reported a burglary. 2 months later, she received a letter from BTK, letting her know she was his intended 8th victim. The letter contained a poem detailing his plans to murder her. Oh Anna, why didn't you appear? 'Twas the perfect plan of deviant pleasure, so bold on that spring night. My inner felling hot with propension of the new awakening season, worn, wet with inner fear and rapture, my pleasure of entanglement, like new vines at night. Oh Anna, why didn't you appear? Drop of fear, fresh spring rain would roll down from your nakedness, to scent to lofty fever that burns within. In that small world of longing, fear, rapture, and desperation, the game we play fall on devil ears. Fantasy spring forth, mounts to storm fury, then winter clam at the end. Oh Anna, why didn't you appear? Alone, now in another time span I lay, with sweet and raptured garments, across most private thought, bed of spring moist grass, clean before the sun, enslaved with control, warm wind scenting the air, sunlight sparkle tears in eyes so deep and clear. Alone again, I trod in past memory of mirrors, and ponder why, for number 8 was not. Oh Anna, why didn't you appear? In the 1970s, there was an arts and drama summer camp for young girls and boys to attend, called New Beginnings. This camp was geared towards young actors and actresses in George Mills, New Hampshire. These rising stars would hone their skills at this camp with the guidance of camp counselors. One of the counselors, John Berger, was popular among the camp. A seemingly down-to-earth, charming, and intelligent man would guide the students to improving their acting talents. Berger seemed like a perfectly normal counselor until one day, everything changed. It was a wet and stormy day. 2 young girls got caught in the rain and decided to take shelter in the nearby post office and kill some time until the weather subsided. The girls would peruse down the aisles before reaching the community notice board. On this board, the girls noticed a poster. It was the FBI's 10 Most Wanted list. As the girls reviewed the poster, they saw something that shocked them. One of the men listed was a man named Rodney Alcala. This man bore a striking resemblance to their camp counselor, John Berger. The girls stared at the poster for some time before being convinced that the man was their camp counselor. The girls rushed out of the post office and immediately alerted their camp's dean, who then alerted the authorities. Rodney Alcala was arrested on August 12, 1971, largely thanks to the information these girls provided. Rodney Alcala would eventually be sentenced to death in California for the murders of 5 people between 1977 and 1979. Alcala has been conclusively linked to 8 different murders. However, authorities believe the actual number could be as high as 130, making him one of the most prolific serial killers of all time. He would be dubbed the dating game killer due to his infamous 1978 appearance on the television show The Dating Game amid his murder spree. Alcala would eventually pass away in prison on July 24, 2001. He was 77 years old. In June 2003, British conservationist Greg Rasmussen is flying solo in an ultralight plane in Zimbabwe, Africa. He has agreed to help a fellow conservationist and search for a lost rhinoceros. Greg had to be wary. He was flying over unfamiliar terrain and had to also be aware of poachers. An ultralight plane can be dangerous to fly in, particularly if it is a hot day, with the air potentially too thin to help keep the plane in the air. Flying over the harsh, dry and rocky terrain, Greg manages to locate the animal in good time. As Greg begins to leave the area, he started going into what is called a wing stall. This stall means that one wing is operating as normal, but the other one isn't. The plane starts nosediving and spiraling towards the ground at a rapid rate. Despite responding to the stall correctly, Greg quickly realizes the plane is going to crash and braces for impact. Greg is awoken to a liquid dripping on his face. He quickly realizes it is leaking petrol. Terrified of the crashed plane exploding, Greg threw himself off the plane and onto the ground. Unable to move his legs, Greg crawled away from the danger area. Then it dawned on Greg, nobody is going to know what has happened. He needs to return to the plane and send out a mayday. Reluctantly, Greg dragged himself back to the plane to make the distress call, terrified that the plane could explode at any second. Unfortunately, the handset had completely fried in the crash, rendering it inoperable. Following this, Greg's adrenaline started wearing off and is quickly replaced with agonizing pain. Greg has multiple internal injuries and his leg has been broken in 6 different places. In particular, Greg's ankles were giving him immense pain. He knew he needed to take his boots off, but due to his injuries, was unable to reach and remove them himself. Worried about gangrene, Greg dragged himself to a nearby tree and leaned against it. He attempted to take his shoes off using a stick. It took an agonizing 2.5 hours, but he got the shoes off and felt relief. Greg reluctantly began dragging himself back to the plane as he needed some sort of shade from the African heat, which had reached 43 degrees Celsius. As he is doing this, Greg hears the sounds of a nearby elephant herd heading towards him. Immediately, Greg is concerned. Unable to move away quickly, Greg is worried the herd may notice him too late, get spooked, and attack, trampling him. The elephants were making a tremendous amount of noise as they approached him. Fortunately, the herd eventually moves on, away from Greg, and he completes his crawl to the plane, finding shelter. As a conservationist, Greg recognizes the footfalls of all animals in the African bush. It's at this time he hears the footfalls of a predator walking nearby. A lion is approaching Greg's crash site. Greg knows his only defense is to make noise at the right time, scaring off the predator. As the lion approaches, Greg makes his move. He repeatedly bangs on the plane with a stick. The lion is spooked and runs away. Greg manages to avoid becoming the lion's next meal. Night quickly approaches, which means the ever-looming threat of predators increases. Greg was fighting to stay awake. He knew if he fell asleep, he wouldn't wake up again. Daylight arrives. Greg has survived the night alone in the African bush. It's almost been 24 hours since he crashed his plane. Soon after, Greg hears the sound of a search plane. It isn't the first time Greg has heard this, but he isn't sure if it's really there or if it's his mind playing tricks on him. Either way, Greg picks up a piece of wreckage from the plane and waves it in the air, hoping it will reflect the light and the search plane will notice him. The sound of the plane fades and Greg drops in despair. Soon after this, Greg once again hears footfalls. Only this time, they are human. Greg was rescued. He survived. He had to undergo over 100 operations to save his legs. After a very long road to recovery, Greg learned to walk again. He has not flown an ultralight plane again. A young girl is at home watching television. This is a big milestone for the girl. Her parents have gone out for the night, and for the first time ever, she has been left at home by herself. The girl watches a news segment which warns of a killer that is currently on the loose in her neighborhood. This immediately sends shivers down the girl's spine, and she goes around the house, ensuring everything is locked. After doing this, the girl feels a small sense of relief and decides to go to bed, taking her beloved dog with her. As she laid in bed, her dog took the usual space under her bed. The girl eventually drifts off to sleep. Hours later, the girl is awoken to a peculiar sound. Drip, drip, drip. Sounds like it's coming from the bathroom. The tap must be leaking a little, she thinks, unsure. The dripping continues, and the noise is beginning to unsettle the girl. She's too scared to go and investigate and feels much safer under the covers in her bed. To reassure herself, she reaches her hand toward the floor for the dog and is rewarded by a reassuring lick on her hand. She eventually goes back to sleep. The next morning, she awakens, and in the light of day, she now has the courage to go inspect the persistent dripping noise. She enters the bathroom and cannot believe her eyes. Her beloved dog is hanging from the shower, with his blood slowly dripping onto the bathroom tiles. In complete shock, the girl turns her head towards a message on the wall, written in the dog's blood. It read, "Humans can lick too." One night, a friend and I were bored, so we went to the local abandoned hospital. There was a large staircase spiraling up to the roof on the outside of the building. There was a locked door at the bottom, so the only way up was to climb on the outside. My buddy boosted me up. I climbed over. I noticed there was a sleeping bag with a steak knife next to it on the landing. I mentioned to my friend, we're definitely not alone here, dude. No, but it's cool, says a voice behind me, scaring the life out of me and causing me to jump and whirl around. There's a young, dirty, homeless-looking guy standing there, coming down the stairs from above, hands up, palms out, Didn't mean to scare you. He takes a seat on the stairs, so I carefully step on the handle of the knife, lean over the edge, and pull my friend up. We had planned to sit on the roof and drink beer, so we offer the guy a beer, which he gratefully accepts, and we chat for a while. We're talking about the city, the cops, traveling, life in general. He's basically a drifter, been in town for a week or so, but a nice guy. Things are going pretty well, but then he asks, "You guys are human, right?" I hate it when I meet people that end up being aliens, and you never know until you peel their skin off. They've been after me a long time, you know. They don't stop. They never stop. Sometimes I think I should just kill everyone to be safe. He's definitely not joking, and there's an uncomfortable silence as my friend and I realize this guy is crazy. "Yeah, man," I say. "We're human. We just wanted to check out the place and drink some beer. We're gonna go ahead and move on now. We definitely don't want any trouble." He just stares in silence, so we leave him the last beer, carefully back away, jump down, and walk away very quickly, constantly looking back over our shoulders. The entire time, he's just standing there, still and silent, watching us leave. That place is still abandoned 5 years later, and we've never been back. I'm not a believer in the supernatural, but humans can be deceptive and dangerous in ways you cannot see coming. My friend's boss bought an Audi A4 convertible back when they were new and interesting. One of the talking points was the pop-up roll hoops that were hidden unless you rolled the car. A few months after buying it, he got to test those roll hoops out as he lost control and skidded down a steep bank. The roll hoops did their job, and he survived with just cuts and scratches from the bushes he'd ploughed through. The car ended up the right way up, and he got out, walked up the bank to the side of the road, and then got on the phone to the police to report the accident. While he was standing there, a driver from a car that had seen the accident came over to speak to him. Approaching from behind, the other driver asked if he was okay, My friend's boss turned around to reply and dropped dead. His neck had been fractured, but it was in one piece right up until he turned his head, when it severed his spinal cord.